Frank Miller was having a rough night. As he drove home from the Vanderlyn's party, the weight of his wife Sharon's anger was palpable. She was hunched in her seat, an icy scowl plastered across her face, as if she could freeze time itself. Frank knew she had every reason to be furious. He had just single-handedly sabotaged what was meant to be an adventurous evening for them, and the consequences were proving to be quite severe. The party at Anne and Hank Vanderlyn's had promised to be a typical social gathering, until the end, when it took a turn Frank had not anticipated. Sharon, in her quest for novelty, had dragged him into an eccentric tradition that the Vanderlyns were known for. Frank had been oblivious to this quirky twist, a party game where all the wives were to drop their house keys into a bowl. The husbands, without looking, would then draw a key and spend the night with the owner of that key. Frank hadn't known about this. Sharon had kept it under wraps, not wanting to spoil the surprise. But as the evening drew to a close and the game was announced, Frank felt his world shift. The reality of what was about to unfold hit him like a freight train. He was furious, his anger bubbling up uncontrollably. "Sharon," he growled as he dragged her into the kitchen, away from prying eyes. "Did you know this was going to happen?" She looked at him with an almost smug expression. "Yes," she replied. "And you didn't think to tell me? Do you know how humiliating this is?" "I knew you wouldn't agree if you knew beforehand," Sharon said, her tone defensive. "You're damn right I wouldn't," Frank shot back. "Let's get out of here." But Sharon was already defending the night's events. "We can't leave now. It would be rude. Besides, it's just one night. It could bring some excitement back into our marriage." "I don't need this kind of excitement," Frank protested. "I want to go home." Sharon's argument continued, insisting it was only one night and that it wouldn't happen again. "I've already put our key in the bowl," she added. "It's too late to back out." Frustration boiled over in Frank. He dragged Sharon back to the living room, where everyone was gathered around the bowl of keys. In a burst of defiance, he reached into the bowl, found their key, the one with the red plastic cover, and pulled it out. Turning to face the room, he declared loudly, "I wasn't informed of this part of the evening's entertainment. I don't believe in cheating, and my wedding vows are sacred to me." A murmur of discontent rose from the other guests. Frank didn't care. He was focused on Sharon, who was now pale with anger. "You have a choice," he said firmly. "Come with me and forget this madness, or stay here and don't come home again." All eyes were on Sharon as her face turned crimson. For a moment, she looked defiant. "I apologize to everyone for my husband's rude behavior," she said with forced calm. "I would love to stay, but clearly, it's better for me to leave." With that, she stormed out, following Frank to the car. Once they were in the car, Sharon erupted. "You're an insufferable, selfish idiot. How dare you embarrass me like that in front of everyone? We'll never be invited back." Frank shot back, his own anger rising. "And what about how you embarrassed me? You didn't even tell me about your little plan to sleep with another man. What was I supposed to do? Grab one of the other wives so we could both have a good time?" Sharon's face twisted with frustration. "I don't want to hear it, Frank." "I don't want another woman, Sharon," Frank said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I reserve that part of my life for my wife. And it's more than a little hurtful to see how little you value that." The drive home was heavy with silence, punctuated only by the occasional sob from Sharon. The evening had unraveled their sense of normalcy, and as they pulled into the driveway, the future of their relationship seemed as uncertain as the night that had just passed. Frank was taken aback, his heart pounding as he listened to Sharon's request. After 10 years of marriage, the idea that she wanted to share their bed with another man was almost too much to process. "Sharon, are you seriously asking for this? After everything we've been through, you're asking to spend just one night with someone else?" Frank's voice was tinged with disbelief. Sharon, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and regret, tried to explain. "It's just one night, Frank. Out of all the countless nights we've shared together, Just one night with another partner. I've been a good wife for the last decade. Isn't it fair to ask for this one adventure? Frank's disbelief only deepened. Sharon, this is a huge request. I can't believe you're so set on this. But it clearly means a lot to you, doesn't it? Yes, it does, Sharon admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about this for weeks. I want just one night where I can be more than a wife and mother. I want to be a woman having an adventure, feeling adored and experiencing something new. Frank's frustration boiled over. So, you want to have sex with someone else just once, and that's all? Is that what this is about? Sharon nodded, her face a mix of hope and guilt. Yes, that's right. Just one night. I need to feel what it's like to be with someone new. It doesn't mean I'm leaving you or that I don't love you. It's just a new experience. Frank's anger flared as he slammed on the brakes, spinning his car around with a screech. He sped back toward their house, his mind racing. Sharon squealed in surprise as he pulled up in front of their home, the cars of their friends still parked outside. Looks like it's not too late for you to get involved, Frank said sharply. Get out. Go enjoy your night with some stranger. Find someone who can give you what I apparently can't. Sharon hesitated, her hand on the door handle. Frank, this isn't just about adventure. It's something I need to experience. But I need you to pick me up in the morning. I'll call you with the details of where I am. Frank's face hardened. There's no way I'm doing that. I'm not going to be your chauffeur after you spent the night with another man. I'm sure your new adventure partner will be more than happy to take you home afterward. Sharon's voice softened, almost pleading. Frank, this isn't about finding a new lover. It's just about experiencing something different for one night. It won't change how I feel about you. I love you, and you're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love. Frank shook his head, his voice filled with pain. You really believe that, don't you? There's no way you can love me and still do this. So let me get this straight, you want to sleep with someone else, and it's just a new experience. What if this results in something more serious? What if another man ends up getting you pregnant? Sharon bristled at his words. That's rude, Frank. I'm on birth control, so that's not an issue. It's just about one night, one new experience. It will be exciting. Just think about how our love life might improve after this. Frank's face was a mix of anger and resignation. Enjoy your night with this new guy. I hope it's everything you want it to be. But know this, 1 second of betrayal is too much. We have a lifetime ahead of us, and you're willing to jeopardize everything for this? Sharon's resolve was firm. It's just one night, Frank. It's not the end of our life together. I'm going to do this, and you need to accept it. Tomorrow morning, I'll be back to being your wife, and we can move on from this. Frank's heart was heavy as he saw her resolve. Tomorrow morning, you'll be back, but things will never be the same. I'm asking you, pleading with you for the last time, don't do this. Sharon's eyes were resolute. I'm going to do it, Frank. And you need to deal with it. Tomorrow, I'll be all yours again, and we can put this behind us. With that, she opened the car door and stepped out, leaving Frank to grapple with the reality of what was about to unfold. The pain of her decision settled heavily on his shoulders as he watched her walk away, the night's dark promise looming ahead. As Frank Miller sat behind the wheel, the enormity of what had just transpired weighed heavily on him. The evening had started out like any other, but it had spiraled into a nightmare, revealing cracks in his marriage he had never imagined. Sharon's decision to participate in such a provocative game at the Vanderlyn's party had shattered their night, and, he feared, their entire relationship. In the car, Sharon's protests and promises had been like salt in an open wound. Frank, you're being unreasonable, she'd said. This is just one night. We're married, and we'll always be married. I love you, and I know how much you love me. We'll get through this. But Frank wasn't convinced. He felt that the night's events had crossed an unforgivable line. "Sharon," he said with a tone of finality, "if you get out of this car and go back to that house, it's over between us. Your one night of reckless behavior will cost you your husband and your family." "No, Frank, that won't happen," she argued desperately. "I won't allow it. We belong to each other, and I'll make it up to you 1,000 times." Frank's heart was breaking. "Sharon," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "this isn't just about excitement for you. It's a tragic end for us. You're talking nonsense. You really think I could be with you after you've spent the night with someone else?" "I'll make you change your mind in the morning," she said confidently, though her voice wavered. "You know how I'll do it." The idea that Sharon could be so blasé about their commitment was infuriating. "Do you really believe that I would touch you after you've had sex with a stranger?" Frank's voice was almost a growl. "Get out of the car. I can't stand to look at you right now." Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and hurt evident. Frank's words hit her like a cold slap, but she still opened the car door. "See you in the morning," she said, her voice trembling. Frank shook his head, a mix of sadness and anger roiling inside him. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal, tires screeching as he sped away. In the rearview mirror, he saw Sharon standing dazed on the side of the road, her face a mask of disbelief. Her mouth hung open as he turned the corner, and soon she was out of sight. Frank drove in a daze, tears blurring his vision. The weight of Sharon's choice, to prioritize a night of passion with a stranger over their decade of marriage, was overwhelming. He had hoped against hope that she would realize her mistake and call him to come back, but the call never came. His father's words echoed in his mind, "If a woman is seriously considering cheating, she's already done it in her mind." It was a brutal truth, but it seemed to fit the situation perfectly. Frank realized that their marriage had been fractured beyond repair. The real tragedy was their 3 children, 9-year-old Jocelyn, 8-year-old Rebecca Ann, and 4-year-old Frank Jr. How could he face the prospect of living without them daily? Yet, he knew he couldn't let Sharon's actions go unaddressed. The kids were staying with Frank's mother for the weekend, which gave him some time to think through his next steps. As he drove aimlessly, he clung to the faint hope that Sharon would call and ask him to come back. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear she had made her choice. Pulling into his driveway, Frank's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and saw it wasn't Sharon. With a heavy heart, he answered. The background noise of the party was unmistakable. "Frank, it's Rick Wilson," the voice on the other end said. "From the party. Your wife gave me your number. I guess she's hoping I can talk some sense into you. She's pretty excited about what's in store tonight. Everyone here is buzzing. She's been saying how lucky you are and that you should come back and join in. There are some hot ladies here who'd love to have a wild night with you." Frank's anger flared. "Screw you, Rick Wilson. I don't want anything to do with that party or your offers. You and your game can go to hell." With that, Frank ended the call, his heart heavy with the realization that his marriage was likely over. He had hoped for reconciliation, but Sharon's actions had pushed him past his breaking point. Now, all he could do was brace himself for the difficult days ahead, and figure out how to move forward without the family he had cherished for so long. Frank's anger was a raw, searing wound as he lashed out, his voice filled with venom. "You manipulative bastard. And everyone else at your little party can go to hell, including my damn wife. I hope you all suffer a miserable fate." He stormed into the house, his mind racing with a blend of rage and hurt. Within 20 minutes, he had packed 2 suitcases with enough clothes for a week or 2. He grabbed his laptop and shaving kit, tossing them into the car with a forceful urgency. As he rifled through drawers, he found their marriage certificate and, with a mix of sorrow and fury, tore it into 4 pieces. He grabbed a hammer and smashed his wedding ring, flattening it with a few hard blows. Once the ring was battered beyond recognition, he placed both the mangled ring and the torn certificate on Sharon's pillow, a bitter farewell to what had once been a cherished commitment. Locking the front door behind him, Frank drove off into the night, his mind consumed by the tumult of his emotions. His plan was to find a motel a few miles out of town, but before settling in, he made one final pass by the Vanderlyn's house. Several cars were already leaving, and a few people lingered in the street, chatting in pairs. Sharon was nowhere to be seen, and Frank guessed she had either left with her new lover or had paired up with Mr. Vanderlyn himself. He drove to a nearby town and found a small, unassuming motel. It was discreet, with a back parking lot that kept his car hidden from curious eyes. After locking the car, he bought a six-pack of Newcastle from a convenience store and retreated to his room. The first two drinks provided a semblance of relaxation, but as he reached for the third, his phone rang. It was Sharon. Frank, certain that she wasn't calling to ask him to pick her up, let the call go to voicemail. Her message was a blend of desperation and justification. "Frank, you're acting like a child about this. Rick Wilson told me what you said. How many times do I have to explain? It's just one night. I'm going to let another guy, just one, have me for a few hours. It doesn't make me a fallen woman. Even if it hurts a little, I promise I'll make it up to you in ways you can't imagine when I get home tomorrow." She continued, "You probably don't care, but since you took our house key, they gave me a new one. The guy who got it is named Glenn. He's nice and assured me he won't do anything I don't like. He's married too, with kids like ours. His wife and her boyfriend are staying here as well, but in another part of the house, far enough away that we won't hear each other when things get heated. You know how loud I can get when you touch me," she giggled, her tone maddeningly casual. "Honey, I know you're upset, but I promise I won't let Glenn do anything to me that you haven't. We're sticking to normal things. Glenn's fine with that, especially since this is my first time with another man. He'll take me home tomorrow, and I'll make sure to shower and freshen up before coming back to you. No sloppy seconds. Sweet dreams, Frank. See you in the morning. Get ready for some hot action. Love you." Frank's rage intensified as he listened to her message. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just by Sharon, but by the entire situation that had unfolded at his expense. The woman he had loved, who had always been a bit whimsical but endearing, had now betrayed him in the most humiliating way possible. The realization that she had turned her infidelity into a casual adventure, flaunting it as though it was a minor indiscretion, left him feeling hollow and enraged. Struggling to contain his fury, Frank decided he had to confront her. He called Sharon back, his voice a low, dangerous growl when she answered. "Hey, Sharon, Glenn and I just got into bed and are getting comfortable with each other, so I can't talk for long." "Shut up, Sharon. This is probably the last time you'll ever hear from me. You have no idea what you've done, but you'll find out soon enough. Enjoy your time with Glenn. I hope it's everything you wanted, because you've made your bed, and now you'll have to lie in it." He ended the call, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and despair. The weight of Sharon's betrayal settled heavily on him as he looked out into the night. He knew that whatever the future held, it would never be the same again. The raw intensity of the conversation I'd just had with Sharon left me reeling. My mind was still racing as I tried to process the reality of the situation. I had made it clear, once she slept with Glenn, our marriage was over. I had never imagined uttering those words, but there they were, hanging heavy in the air. My anger was palpable, and I had never felt such hatred toward someone I once loved so deeply. The thought of divorcing her and moving on seemed like the only way to regain control of my life. I ended the call with a finality that was meant to be both an ultimatum and a declaration. But 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a new call from Sharon. I let it go to voicemail, bracing myself for the inevitable emotional plea. "Frank," her voice cracked through the speaker, laden with distress. "Why are you doing this? I'm your wife. How can you say these things to me? I don't understand why you can't let me have this one night with Glenn. We're just getting started, and you're ruining everything for me. I don't know if I can enjoy being with him the way I want to with you messing this up. We're not going to get divorced. I'll be home in the morning, and we'll work things out. I would come home now, but I promised Glenn a night together. Please understand, he has my key, and I promised him. He really wants this now. While I'm talking to you. I have to go. Glenn's ready. Oh, God, Frank, I love you, but this is happening. Please try to understand. Her voice trailed off into whispered moans as she spoke to Glenn, her betrayal now echoing in my ears. The finality of her words stung sharply. My heart ached with the realization that our marriage, built over a decade, was crumbling over one night of infidelity. I couldn't let it end like this. Despite the anger and hurt, I called her back. The phone rang several times before it went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice heavy with the pain and disillusionment I felt. Sharon, I began, after hearing your last message, it's clear that Glenn has you now. You're with him, and it sounds like you're enjoying every moment. You've broken my heart, Sharon, and I'm struggling to forgive you. It's astounding that you could keep a promise to a man you've known for only a short time but couldn't uphold the vows you made to the man who's loved you faithfully for over 10 years. I don't even recognize you anymore. You won't see me in the morning, and you might never see me again. Next week, you'll be served with divorce papers, and I'll be pursuing charges for adultery. You're free to continue your affair with Glenn and anyone else you choose. But remember this, you've lost me forever. That's a promise I intend to keep. The voicemail was sent. I knew Sharon was probably too caught up in her new lover to respond, and honestly, it didn't matter. The damage was irreversible. The marriage I had cherished and fought for was now a shadow of its former self. She had disrespected me, humiliated me, and made a mockery of our relationship. There was no coming back from this. I finished off the remaining beers from the six-pack I had been drinking, trying to numb the pain. I didn't want to spend the night imagining my wife, the woman who had been my everything, in the arms of another man. Sharon had always been vocal during sex, and I couldn't shake the image of her pleas and moans now being directed at Glenn. The alcohol eventually took its toll, and I fell into a restless sleep, tears still wet on my cheeks. When I woke up about 4 hours later, reality hit me with the force of a freight train. My wife had cheated on me, and I needed a plan to protect my children, sever ties with Sharon, and maybe even make some of those partygoers suffer for their role in this mess. We lived in Bayou, Mississippi, a picturesque antebellum area on the Gulf Coast. Mississippi's laws regarding adultery could work in my favor. They might help me avoid paying child support and potentially gain custody of our children. What I needed now was a top-notch lawyer, someone who could navigate this legal and emotional minefield with expertise. I showered, changed, and called my mother at 7:30 a.m. She was equally shocked by Sharon's actions, and she assured me that the kids were safe with her for the weekend. Her support was a small comfort in the midst of the storm that had engulfed my life. Now, all I could do was prepare for the coming battle, and hope that I could salvage some semblance of stability for my children and myself. After the tumultuous events of the previous night, Frank felt a deep and painful disorientation. He had planned to pick up the divorce papers and was bracing himself for what he presumed would be Sharon's likely victory in a custody battle, at least in the short term. Despite his anger and heartbreak, he had to admit that Sharon had been a devoted mother and wife, until everything fell apart. As soon as Frank ended his call with his mother, he decided to get some breakfast at a diner just a block away from the motel. The early morning air was cool and crisp, but as he parked and was about to head inside, his phone buzzed. It was Sharon. He hesitated, contemplating whether to answer, but ultimately decided against it and let the call go to voicemail. Almost immediately, the phone rang again, and then again, relentless in its persistence. By the fifth call, Sharon had left a message, her voice choked with tears. "Damn it, Frank. Answer the phone. Talk to me. What do you mean I might never see you again? And what's this nonsense about divorce papers? You can't leave me, Frank. We have 3 precious little ones who need us both. Oh my God, Frank, why did you tear up our marriage certificate and destroy your beautiful wedding ring? How could you do that? I gave you that ring on our wedding day, and you promised to wear it forever. It was a symbol of our eternal love. I knew you'd be upset, but I never thought you'd go this far. I love you so much, Frank. I just really needed that special night with Glenn. And it was special. He made me feel like a young girl again. I've almost forgotten what it's like to laugh and scream with joy. But despite how great last night was, you are my man, Frank. My only man. I know how to make it up to you and make your grudges go away. Come home, Frank. Let me prove how much I love you. Come home and bring me back. Her voice was breaking, turning to sobs as she continued. Damn you, Frank. Why can't you understand? I just needed one night with someone new, to feel something new with another man who wanted me. It was nice to know that someone else desired me, thought I was beautiful enough that he couldn't wait to be with me. You don't understand how good it feels for a woman my age to see that a man is excited by her, that she can make him want her. Please, Frank, you have to understand it was just sex. That's all. He just had sex with me. Please, talk to me. I love you. You and our children are my life. The message ended with Sharon's voice fading into a desperate cry. Frank stood outside the diner, stunned and shaken. Was this how Sharon had felt throughout their marriage, and only now was it all coming to light? After 30 years together, he was suddenly faced with a truth he hadn't anticipated. Sharon, at 55, remained a striking woman, shoulder-length dark brown hair, light blue eyes, and a figure that still drew attention. Her breasts, though not overly large, were complemented by her curvaceous hips, which had expanded slightly after having 3 children. Despite her enduring appeal, she seemed to need validation from another man. Frank had always expressed his love and desire for her, through flowers, weekly outings, sexy lingerie, and daily affirmations. Their sex life had been fulfilling, at least in his eyes, with their intimate moments peaking multiple times a week. Now, he was left questioning everything he thought he knew. Had he missed something fundamental? Had his efforts not been enough? The thought gnawed at him as he walked into the diner. He found a booth, ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee, but could barely touch his food. He downed cup after cup of coffee, seeking solace in the bitter liquid, but it did little to quell the turmoil inside him. Never before had Frank felt so lost, so empty, so defeated. He understood, in a visceral way, the sentiments of those who wished for death. The only thing keeping him tethered to life was the thought of his children and the slim hope that somehow, he could find a way through this darkness. As I sat in the dim light of my motel room, the weight of Sharon's betrayal pressed heavily on my chest. The thoughts of my children, Jocelyn, Rebecca Ann, and little Frank Jr., were the only things keeping me anchored. I had to endure this hellish ordeal created by Sharon and forge a future for them. This determination, born out of necessity, was the only thing driving me forward. I was resolute, I would get through this. I just needed a plan. Sharon's calls came incessantly throughout the day, at least 20 times. Each time, I sent them straight to voicemail. Her messages were full of pleas and explanations, but never an apology. She never admitted her mistake. Instead, she seemed to think that one night of indulgence with another man was something I should simply accept and understand. She was determined to convince me that this was a minor transgression that could easily be forgiven. It was almost as if she believed that our entire 10-year marriage could be overshadowed by a single night of lust. Her voicemail was a painful reminder of her complete disregard for our vows. She spoke of Glenn, the man she had chosen to spend the night with, and how she needed this experience to revive her sense of self. It was clear from her voice that she was in the throes of passion, and the realization that she was with another man while begging me for understanding cut deep. Her words, "Oh God, Glenn is ready," echoed cruelly in my mind. I called her back, but after several rings, it went to voicemail. Her voice sounded breathless, almost euphoric as she whispered to Glenn. Her response was a final, devastating blow. I left a message, cold and resolute. After hearing your last message, it's clear that Glenn has you now. You've broken my heart beyond repair, Sharon. You've kept your promise to him but failed to uphold your vows to me. I will never forgive this. Next week, you'll be served with divorce papers, and I will be charging you with adultery. You've chosen your path, and now you can follow it without me. I could almost picture her reaction, likely more frustration and confusion, perhaps even more tears. But it didn't matter. The damage was irrevocable. Our marriage was over, and I couldn't take her back after the disrespect and humiliation she had heaped upon me. I finished off a six-pack of beer, trying to numb the pain and avoid the mental images of her with Glenn. As the alcohol took effect, I eventually drifted into a restless sleep, tears still streaking my face. Hours later, I woke with a start, overwhelmed by the reality of Sharon's affair. My thoughts raced. I needed to protect my children, remove her from my life, and perhaps find some solace by making those at the party aware of the fallout from their so-called fun. I lived in Bayou, Mississippi, a picturesque area on the Gulf Coast, where adultery was a valid ground for divorce. It meant I could potentially avoid paying child support and fight for custody of my kids. I needed a top-notch lawyer, and I needed one fast. I showered and dressed, then called my mother at 7:30 a.m. to update her. She was as stunned by Sharon's actions as I was. My kids had been with her for the weekend, and she had assured me they were fine. Sharon had already called my mother, inquiring about the kids and my whereabouts. My mother told her that I was heartbroken and unwilling to talk to her. Sharon's reaction was a sob story about how I didn't understand, and she even offered to pick up the kids. My mother advised her to stay away for a few more days to let things settle. Seeing my children had been a bittersweet solace. They were happy to see me but missed their mother. I told them she was busy with an important project and that they'd be staying with their grandmother for a little longer. After spending quality time with them, I hugged and kissed them goodbye and headed back to my motel. The next day, I had one final task before diving into the whirlwind of legal battles. I drove past my house, and as soon as I saw it, tears welled up again. The sight of the place that had been our home, now tainted by betrayal, was almost too much to bear. There were no unfamiliar cars in the driveway, only the soft glow of the kitchen light. I was sure Sharon was alone, at least for now. The temptation to spy on her was overwhelming. I parked a block away and approached the house cautiously, peering through the kitchen window. Sharon was sitting at the table, her appearance disheveled, an empty bottle of Grey Goose beside her. Her robe was rumpled, and her mascara had smeared down her face. She was clearly distraught, surrounded by tissues. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but then the anger and pain from her betrayal surged back. I wanted to scream at her, but instead, I walked back to my car and drove away. The satisfaction was fleeting, but perhaps she was beginning to grasp the enormity of her actions. If she wanted sympathy, she would have to get it from Glenn. Monday came, and with it, the reality of the situation settled in. I had a lot of tasks ahead. Breakfast at the diner was simple: eggs, toast, and black coffee, but I forced myself to eat it all. I called my mom to speak with each of my children, reassuring them of my love and promising to see them soon. Then I contacted my office, informing my assistant that I would be handling personal matters for the foreseeable future. As I faced the future, the weight of the past lingered, but I was determined to find a path forward for my children and myself, even if it meant navigating through the wreckage of a broken marriage. Over the next 2 days, I made it clear to Sharon that if anything urgent came up, she should call or text me. When she asked if something was wrong, I simply told her yes, but I would explain later. I needed time to process everything, and I knew I needed to talk to my old friends for some advice. During my senior year at Ole Miss, I had shared an apartment with 2 close friends, Douglas Pritter III and Maxwell McCrae. We had been best friends ever since, even though we only managed to meet occasionally over the years. I had pursued a degree in computer science, Doug had gone into business administration, and Max had become a lawyer. Despite our different paths, we had stayed in touch, and now I needed their support. I reached out to Doug, asking if he and Max could meet me for drinks that evening. I needed their advice on a significant matter. Doug agreed to contact Max and meet me at Lava Bar, a beachside spot where we could catch up and talk. I arrived early, found a table on the patio, and ordered a beer to wait for them. Max showed up just after 5, and Doug arrived about 10 minutes later. We greeted each other with warm hugs and took our seats, raising our glasses in a toast. Doug was the first to ask, "So, what's the matter, Frank? Your call seemed pretty urgent." I took a deep breath and laid it all out. Sharon cheated on me and flaunted it. It was like she wanted to rub it in my face. I'm struggling to even process it. "Damn, Frank," Doug said, shaking his head. "I can't believe she did that." "Me neither," Max chimed in. "It's like she did it without a shred of shame or remorse. And now she still thinks I'm overreacting. Can you believe this?" "So, what are you going to do?" Max asked, leaning forward. "What's your plan?" "I want a divorce," I said, my voice steady but filled with resolve. "I also want to make sure Glenn, whoever he is, and everyone else at that party get what's coming to them. More importantly, though, I want to fight for custody of my kids." Max nodded thoughtfully. "It won't be easy. If she's a good mother and isn't doing anything to harm the kids, she might get custody. Unless she's been bringing strange men into your home while the kids are there, it'll be a tough fight." "I can accept that she might get custody," I said, "as long as I can see the kids whenever I want. I'm prepared to deal with child support if it comes to that." Max continued, "The courts usually want both parents involved in raising their children, as long as both are good parents." "What about finances?" Doug jumped in. "Sharon's a stay-at-home mom, right? And you're making a good 6-figure salary. How are your finances, checking and savings accounts, investments, 401k, IRA?" I replied, "I have a mix of everything, checking, savings, investments, 401k, and an IRA. It all adds up to around $700,000 to $800,000, maybe a bit more." Doug nodded. "The court will likely split everything in half. Sharon will probably get the house and custody. But if you can prove adultery, you might not have to pay alimony." Max added, "I know a top-notch divorce attorney in Mississippi, Maddie Simmons. She's one of the best in family law. Should I set up an appointment for you?" "Yes, please," I said. "The sooner, the better." Doug said, "In the meantime, I'll help protect your assets. Send me all your financial details, and I'll take care of it." We toasted again, drank a bit more, and then said our goodbyes. I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. I was still overwhelmed, but having a plan gave me some hope. As I drove back to my motel, my mind racing with everything I needed to do, my phone rang. It was Sharon. I debated whether to answer but ultimately decided I needed to talk to her eventually. I pulled over and picked up. "What do you want, Sharon?" I asked bluntly. "Frank, why are you doing this?" "I want my husband to come home where he belongs," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I can tell you're upset, but don't say things like divorce. We've been together for 10 years. One night away from you doesn't mean we're done. Unfortunately for you, your little fun with Glenn has made it impossible for me to return home," I replied coldly. She began sobbing. "Don't say that, Frank. It was just one night. It doesn't justify a divorce." "Adultery is grounds for divorce in Mississippi," I told her. "And it's not just a fling. When a married woman has sex with another man, it's cheating, plain and simple. I warned you that the moment you slept with someone else, it would be over between us." "Oh God, Frank, please," she pleaded. "You can't do this to me. You did this to yourself, Sharon," I said. "What happened to you? Are you on drugs, having a breakdown, or just completely oblivious? You were so consumed with the thrill of being with another man that you disregarded everything, our children, my feelings, our life together. And now, it's over. I ended the call and sat in my car, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. The decision had been made, and while I felt a measure of clarity, the pain of the situation still cut deep. "You're paying the consequences now," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I thought we were genuinely happy. We had a nice house, 3 amazing kids, and our sex life was fulfilling. And yet, you've thrown it all away by sleeping with some stranger and flaunting it in my face." Sharon's response was almost nonchalant, as if my pain was an inconvenience she couldn't quite understand. "Frank, we have always been happy. We're happy now. I just wanted to see what it would be like to be with another man for one night. It was just a fleeting experience. I never intended for it to cause harm." But I couldn't fathom how she could be so detached from the devastation she had caused. "You don't understand the damage you've inflicted at all. You shattered our family in a single night because of your selfishness. You've broken our lives into a million pieces, and there's no hope of ever putting them back together." Sharon's face betrayed no regret. "I never meant for it to be like this, Frank. I didn't realize I was hurting you. I just wanted something new. It was never about you, it was about what I needed. I didn't think it would lead to this." Her words were infuriating. "You removed me from the equation entirely. Your affair with Glenn was all about you and him, with no consideration for me or our children. You said you needed a special night for yourself, and you got it. But it came at the cost of your marriage and, very likely, your reputation among family and friends." I looked at her with a mix of anger and pity. "There might come a day when I can forgive you, but I will never forget. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Just as you dismissed my feelings as childish, I'll see how you react when everyone learns about your affair. You've tarnished our marriage and your own reputation. Do you really think Glenn's satisfaction is worth all this?" Her pleas were desperate. "Frank, please, you can't do this. My parents will be devastated." "Too bad, Sharon," I said coldly. "You should have thought about the consequences before you acted. You made your bed, filled it with betrayal, and now you have to lie in it. This isn't a minor infraction, it's a severe breach of trust. You traded a strong, 10-year marriage for a night of fleeting pleasure with a stranger. You gave up everything for something that's ultimately insignificant." She tried to justify her actions. "I didn't have to lose anything, Frank. You should have been supportive. I just wanted to try something new. Isn't that reasonable?" "No, Sharon," I countered. "No sane person would support their partner's affair just because they wanted a new experience. That's not how commitment works. What were you thinking? Did you really believe that this was a harmless adventure?" Her explanation was weak and self-serving. "I heard about couples doing things like this at Vander Links, and it intrigued me. I thought that experiencing something new with a different man wouldn't diminish my love for you. It was just a one-time thing. I wanted to try it once and then return to you fully committed. But it's clear you didn't respect me," I said, struggling to contain my hurt. "I begged you not to do this. I asked you over and over, and you ignored me. You smiled and said you'd see me in the morning. You've deprived me of the intimacy we shared for over 10 years. Our vows, which meant so much to me, obviously meant little to you." Her silence was heavy with guilt, but it did nothing to ease the agony I felt. The betrayal was not just a personal affront, it was a violation of everything we had built together. I had hoped for understanding and reconciliation, but now, all that remained was the painful realization of what she had done. I looked at her one last time, knowing that our relationship was beyond repair. What we once had was gone, irrevocably altered by her actions. The only thing left now was to find a way to move forward, to protect my children, and to reclaim the life that had been so cruelly upended. We had 3 beautiful children who loved us both dearly. Together, we were a family, bound together by an exclusive and sacred bond. But now, Sharon, you willingly gave that part of yourself, the part that joined with me to create our children, to another man. For what? A fleeting thrill? A special one-night stand? You say it was just one night, and I should accept it and move on. But for me, it's more than that. It's a complete abandonment of everything we built together, our family, your sacred vows of loyalty, and any respect you ever had for me. You wanted to be with another man, and you did it. Congratulations, Sharon. You achieved what you set out to do. But what you really did was toss aside everything you claimed to value and treasure. Part of me still loves you, but I can never be a part of your life again. You shattered our life together, and no amount of apologies or excuses can repair it. You ask why I can't understand your actions, but the truth is, you broke something fundamental between us. I can't forgive and forget something as profound as this betrayal. This wound will bleed for the rest of my life. I've already found a lawyer, and tomorrow, I'll be filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I'll name Glenn in the divorce proceedings, as well as every person at your little party that I can identify. Just imagine the reaction when your adulterous friends discover that you are responsible for the destruction of their little club and possibly their reputations. Go to hell, Sharon, and take all your adulterer friends with you. Walking into Maddie Simmons' office felt like finding a lifeline in the storm of my life. She was direct and no nonsense. She wanted to know why I was filing for divorce and what outcomes I was aiming for. I explained that I was prepared to split our material assets, including offering her the house in exchange for a reduced cash settlement. I also knew that despite my accusations of infidelity, getting full custody of the children would be challenging, but I wanted as much access as possible without paying child support. I played the audio evidence of Sharon's betrayal, where she openly admitted to her affair with Glenn. Miss Simmons listened intently, shaking her head in disbelief at how my wife could be so naive as to think I wouldn't be devastated by her actions, and even more so to admit it all in a message that could be used against her in court. "We'll likely need a voice recognition expert to confirm it's your wife's voice," Miss Simmons said. "But unless we end up with an exceptionally bad judge, these recordings should be admissible." We spent the rest of the hour discussing strategies to address Glenn and the others from the wife-swapping party. While it was unlikely we could demand monetary compensation from them, we might find a way to publicize their activities and shame them into feeling significant pain. This was a consolation for me, and I agreed it was enough. I gave Miss Simmons a deposit and requested that Sharon be served with the divorce papers as soon as possible. She assured me it wouldn't take long and promised to inform me before it happened. On Tuesday afternoon, I picked up my kids from my mom's place and took them to Sharon's house. When she opened the door, she hugged and kissed the children tightly, then reached out to me. I backed away, unable to reciprocate her gesture. She broke down in tears, begging me to stay, but I told her I couldn't. I thought it would be best for the kids to come home to her, and I promised to pick them up on Friday for the weekend. Sharon looked devastated, and while I felt a pang of sympathy, I reminded myself that she brought this upon herself. Her struggles were nothing compared to the agony she caused me. Wednesday, I returned to work, knowing I couldn't afford to neglect my responsibilities. Work became my refuge, a necessary distraction from the pain of Sharon's betrayal. If I allowed myself to drown in self-pity, I feared I'd lose my sanity, and I couldn't let that happen, not with my children depending on me. On Thursday, I met up with Doug and Max for dinner at the Oyster House. As I enjoyed freshly shucked oysters and a dirty martini, their presence provided a much-needed break from the turmoil. We talked, laughed, and shared stories, which, for a few hours, helped me forget the wreckage of my personal life. Over dinner, Doug and I sipped martinis while discussing my ongoing legal battles and personal struggles. I brought him up to speed on the latest developments with my children and the divorce proceedings. Doug, ever the strategist, began analyzing potential ways to shield some of my assets. I agreed to his plan, understanding that while it wouldn't make a significant difference in the short term, Every little bit would help in the long run. We devised a relatively straightforward approach to create some disruption at the wife-swapping club without risking accusations of defamation. Max, a close friend of mine, had a journalist buddy at the Beloit Sun-Herald. Max was confident that if I provided him with the location of Vander Link's house and the general time the swinger group met, his friend could uncover the identities of some participants. The plan was to craft an editorial exposing the illicit activities at Vander Link's, featuring vague yet suggestive photos of couples entering and leaving the venue. By hinting at possible affiliations with local businesses, we hoped to stir up enough outrage among the city's moral majority to make life uncomfortable for everyone involved. I handed over what little information I had, and Max assured me he would get started immediately. We shook hands with a mix of anticipation and resolve before parting ways. My weekend with the kids was a bright spot amid the turmoil. We indulged in shopping for new clothes, enjoyed a movie at Disney's Grand 18 Theater in d'Iberville, and spent an exhilarating day at the beach, swimming and playing frisbee. My children were my anchor, and I promised myself that I would never let them down. Monday morning brought news from Max. His contact at the newspaper had expressed enthusiasm for the story idea and was already working on capturing images of the couples arriving and departing from Vander Link's. While the faces would be blurred to protect identities, the community was small enough that it wouldn't take long for the local moral crusaders to piece together the puzzle. If everything went as planned, the exposé would make the front page later that week. I crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. Throughout the week, Sharon's calls became increasingly desperate. She pleaded for me to come home, promising to do anything to mend our fractured relationship. Yet, despite her pleas, she never offered an apology or acknowledged the gravity of her actions. On Wednesday, my lawyer informed me that Sharon would be served with the divorce papers at our home on Friday morning. Later, Doug confirmed that he had managed to hide about a third of my assets by transferring them into my children's names. Finally, Max reached out with an update from his journalist friend. The swingers gathering was scheduled again for Friday night at Vander Link's, and his contact planned to document the event from an unmarked van parked across the street. He wanted to interview me again to provide more context for the story, and if everything fell into place, the article would be published in the following week's edition. As Friday arrived, I awaited the inevitable call from Sharon following her receipt of the divorce papers. My lawyer's call at 2:30 p.m. confirmed that the papers had been served. No more than 10 minutes later, my phone rang with Sharon's number flashing on the screen. I couldn't help but smile, anticipating what she wanted to say. Although I considered letting the call go to voicemail, I decided to answer. "Hi Sharon, how are you?" I greeted, my tone deliberately calm. "What the hell did you do, Frank?" she demanded, her voice cold and accusatory. "I filed for divorce, Sharon. Just as I told you I would. You can't do this, Frank. I told you there would be no divorce," she retorted, her voice rising with frustration. "Well, Sharon, a one-night stand with another man is classified as adultery in Mississippi," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. Her response was a mix of anger and tears. "Why are you so angry with me, Frank? I love you. Glenn just had sex with me a few times. It was just an affair, nothing more." "Sorry, Sharon, but that's not how it works," I said, struggling to contain my exasperation. "You need to understand that this isn't just about sex. It's about trust, commitment, and the destruction of everything we built together." Her attempts to downplay her actions only made the situation worse. The conversation ended with her sobs and my resolve firm. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The path forward was clear, and no amount of pleading would change the fact that our marriage was irreparably broken. I once had the misguided belief that having an affair was the ultimate betrayal. How could I have been so wrong? "Sharon, it's over. I warned you repeatedly, begged you not to stray, but you went ahead and did it anyway. Now, you'll face the consequences. And believe me, this isn't the end of your problems. Goodbye, Sharon. I hope you find some semblance of happiness, though I doubt it will be genuine. Ending the call was a relief, yet the pain of still loving Sharon lingered. It was a love that might never fully fade, but the trust was irreparably shattered. I couldn't stay married to someone who had so blatantly betrayed me. Despite knowing I should avoid the Vanderlinks' Friday night party, I couldn't resist driving by just once. I wanted to see if Sharon's car was there, though I doubted she would attend. As expected, her car wasn't in sight. However, there was a van parked across the street, likely belonging to a reporter. I wished him luck in capturing whatever scandal was brewing. The next afternoon, Max's friend, the reporter, called me for some information. He told me he had taken over 100 photographs and identified more than a dozen prominent couples from the city. Strangely, none of the couples seemed to match those who were leaving the Vanderlink house 2 hours later. Max had given him a photo of Sharon, and he confirmed that she wasn't among the people entering or exiting the house. The reporter asked me to describe my experience at one of the key parties, and I did my best. I recounted how the keys were placed in a bowl and how the men would draw keys, though I never saw that part. However, I had a good understanding of the process from Sharon's descriptions and overhearing other couples talk about their past experiences. Before hanging up, he asked if he could mention in his article that he had first-hand knowledge of at least one marriage ruined by these parties and the impact on children due to their parents' divorces. I gave him the green light. The article appeared in the Sunday edition of the newspaper, and the impact was immediate and explosive. The front page featured a large photo of people arriving and leaving the Vanderlink house, their faces blurred but still recognizable. Additional photos spread across 4 more pages, showing dozens of blurred faces. Despite attempts to obscure their identities, it was easy to identify many participants by their cars and clothing. It was essentially the city's elite. By Monday, the entire city was abuzz. The scandal had everyone talking. A dozen priests gave interviews condemning the moral decay of their community, and civic leaders denounced the city for its lost values. Lawsuits and counterclaims flooded in, with prominent companies losing clients and more than one couple finding themselves in divorce court. For me, it was a satisfying turn of events, a fitting retribution for the hell I had endured due to Sharon's betrayal and the breakup of my family. Even if some people figured out I'd been cuckolded, I didn't care. I got my revenge, and that was what mattered most. Sharon tried for months to reconcile, but it was too late. The divorce was finalized, and I received joint custody of our children. During the months I have them, Sharon takes them on weekends, and vice versa. It's not the ideal arrangement, but we're managing. And since Sharon didn't contest the terms, the process was smoother than I'd anticipated.